Dorothea Puente really did seem like a sweet little old lady. She presented herself as a caretaker who was running a boarding house in Sacramento, California, and she would take people in that were in desperate need of help. These people were homeless, they were the elderly, they were disabled, and they were mentally ill. She gladly put a roof over their heads, but in return, she stole their social security and disability checks, and she killed them. Yes, Dorothea may have appeared to be a sweet little old lady, but her demeanor hid her true identity. She was a cold-blooded killer in pursuit of cash, and her boarding house provided the opportunity to siphon money from those less fortunate than herself. She would poison them, and she would kill them. 7 bodies were eventually found buried on her property, and she was ultimately accused of killing 9 people. Like any city, Sacramento had and still has a homeless problem. Back in the 1980s, some of the city's homeless found refuge in the home of Dorothea Puente. At the time, Dorothea was running a boarding house, and she would offer a room to people who were battling with homelessness as well as substance abuse, or even if they had a criminal record. But, there's always a but, as it turns out, Dorothea wasn't helping these people at all. Instead, yes, she would bring these boarders in, but then she would rob them, she would kill them, and then she buried their bodies in her backyard. If this is your first visit to my channel, hello, welcome. It is great to have you here. Here on my channel, I talk about true crime stories. I find them interesting, and I am intrigued by why people do the horrible things that they do. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel because it would really help me in my attempts to grow my channel. Okay, so today I am going to be talking about a very horrible woman. This woman is called Dorothea Puente. But first, there is a warning because I haven't really been putting warnings up for my videos, so I feel like I need to do that so nobody gets like a shock. I will be talking about people being killed. There is talk of suicide. There's talk of people dealing with mental health issues, and also there is some brief talk about SA. And with that, let's jump into today's story. Dorothea Puente was born Dorothea Helen Gray on January the 9th, 1929. She lived in Redlands, California. Her parents were Trudy May and her dad was Jesse James Gray. Dorothea, she didn't have an easy start to life. It was pretty rough. Both of her parents were alcoholics and her mum was a sex worker. Also, her dad had some pretty bad mental health issues. He would often hold a gun to his head and he would threaten to kill himself in front of his kids. That would be absolutely horrifying to witness for those poor children. The PTSD in that house would have been really bad. So Dorothea grew up in a really big family. She was the 6th child of 7 children. Her parents, they weren't really around because, you know, they're too busy drinking, gambling, taking drugs, just not being parents. So the kids, they would actually scrounge for food and basically have to look after themselves. Their dad did work, but he used his money for alcohol and drugs. So yeah, the kids would have to go and find their own food. He actually worked picking cotton for a living. But yet they kept on having kids. Like, what? Why are you having kids if you don't want to pay for them? Like, I know contraception back then probably wasn't that great, but you can pull out. Did I just take that too far? I think I might have. I may have to cut that part out. Anyway, I just say it as I see it. But anyway, I just don't think that they should be having children if they don't want to provide for said children. even, like, there's people out there that aren't in their kids' lives, but they still pay child support. It's just my opinion. Anyway, then in 1937, her dad, he passed away. He had tuberculosis, and her mum went into a tailspin, which ultimately lost her custody of her 7 kids. Her mum actually passed away only months after the dad did. She was killed in a motorcycle accident. So now Dorothea and her siblings, they were orphans, and they were all sent to an orphanage. Apparently, inside this orphanage, the children were treated horribly. They were beat, they were essayed, and this was by staff and the other kids. All of this happened to this girl before she was 8 years old. It's horrible. That's a lot for a small child to go through. And in 1945, when she was only 16 years old, she started to sell her body for sex. So she would do this in motels to survive. Really sad, hard times. Then, also in 1945, she met a guy and she married him. This was 22-year-old Fred McFall, who was a soldier and had just returned from the Pacific Theatre of World War II. Also, on their marriage certificate, she lied about her age. She actually said that she was 30 when she's 16, but apparently she was able to make herself look older. So Dorothea and Fred had their first child in 1946. It was a little girl, and that was when she was 17, and then they had their second child in 1948 when she was 18. They also got pregnant a third time, but they lost their baby after Dorothea had a miscarriage. Their marriage wasn't a happy one, and they would give up both of their children. One daughter went to live with family, and the other daughter was put up for adoption. Fred would leave Dorothea in late 1948, only 3 years after they got married. That's pretty rough. So she just went through all those pregnancies, and it's pretty rough. And she's so young. She's still a teenager at this stage. It sounds like a pretty unhappy life for her so far, right? Like, can this get any worse? Yup, it sure can. Things never got easier for Dorothea, mostly because she did it to herself, but this stuff, you know, this younger stuff from her parents and whatnot. Anyway, in 1948, Dorothea, she started breaking the law. She started forging checks, and she would use them to buy, like, womanly items, handbags, pads. I don't know, did they have pads back then? But womanly items. She was caught pretty quick though, and she was arrested. So in court, she pled guilty to 2 counts of forgery, and she was sentenced to 4 months in jail and 3 years of probation. Once she got out of jail, she left Riverside and she moved to San Francisco, where she met merchant seaman Axel Bren Johansson. I wonder if moving was a breach of her probation, because, like, when you are on probation, you can't move out of town without getting permission from your probation officer. Well, that's how it is here. Maybe it was a different time. I don't know. But when I did because I actually just filmed the Charles Manson case. I am still working on editing it. I will get it up. It's a long one. It's full on. But yeah, so he got in trouble for breaching his probation. So same time era. Anyway, in 1952, Dorothea married Axel, but he had to go away for work a lot. And while he was out at sea, she had random guys over. So yeah, she'd have these random men over for nights of sex and gambling. She would use Axel's money for this gambling, which ended up causing a massive problem for their marriage. There were heated arguments quite often over this. She was also prostituting herself, and she would go by the name of Taya Nyara, who she claimed was a Muslim woman of Egyptian and Israeli descent, even though she clearly did not look like she could be because she was European. But okay, maybe she just put on a different type of foundation shade, I don't know. Dorothea, she took advantage of her husband. She would use the money that was meant to pay the bills on whatever the heck she wanted. She just, instead of paying the bills, she just went and bought herself stuff, and she used it to gamble. Yep, needless to say, he found out, and their marriage went downhill fast. But he still stuck around, even though he probably should have got out of there you know, once he found out she was sleeping around. Like, I couldn't be with someone if they slept with someone else. It'd be done. Like, the gambling thing, I could work through. We could do, like, you know, some counseling or whatever. But sleeping with someone else, game changer. Not happening. No. Anyway, moving on from that. In 1960, when Dorothea was 31 years old, she got arrested again. She was running a brothel and pretending that it was a bookkeeping firm. But, of course, the police found out and they discovered what it really was, and she got put back in front of a judge. The court found her guilty and she was sentenced to 90 days in the Sacramento County Jail. I wonder if her husband knew that she was running a brothel. He must have, right? Like, he would have to know. I don't know. Maybe. Then, when Dorothea got out of jail, she started to get worse. So, when she came home, she wasn't any better. She was still taking Axel's money to go gambling. She was still lying to him. She was still cheating on him. She was binge drinking, and she actually attempted to take her own life. Axel, he actually really cared about this woman, and he was really worried about her behavior. So he had her committed to a state hospital in 1961 to get her treatment. So while she was in this hospital, she had a psych evaluation done, and the doctors ended up diagnosing Dorothea as a pathological liar who had an unstable personality, and it was also said that she had schizophrenia. So when she got out of the hospital, nothing had changed, and she was annoyed that her husband put her in there in the beginning. She just continued. She continued to be a shitty person, and Axel, he just could not take it anymore. He's out working at sea, and when he comes home, he's getting grief from his wife. He just couldn't do it. She's all over the place. He had tried everything to help this woman, but she was beyond help. I mean, you know, the childhood she had, yeah, she was still taking the money for her own personal use, and she was drinking up a storm. Apparently she was drinking a lot. She was all over the place, and she was becoming really nasty towards Axel. So in 1966, Axel ended up filing for divorce. He was done. It was done. Over it. Can't do it anymore. So now Dorothea was on her own, and she decided that she wanted to reinvent herself, as we do when we break up with someone, right? Like, I was blonde and now I'm a redhead, so yeah. So she started going by the name of Sharon Johansson, who was a nice Christian woman. She would go to church and she met new people. She even started taking in women who were down on their luck. She would put a roof over these ladies' heads for free, which gave everybody around town the impression that she was a really good person, a nice Christian woman. This was a facade. She wasn't nice. She's up to something. We know what kind of person she is. She's not a good person. I don't believe she was actually born this way. I believe that she turned out this way because of all the crap that she went through as a child. This stuff she went through as a kid is just horrible. And then to have schizophrenia on top of it, it's like, oh my God. Like, I actually had sympathy for her in that regard in the beginning. Like, for her as a child. I have sympathy for her as a child. But I do not have sympathy for her for what she goes on to do later on as an adult. So I have sympathy for her as a kid, but not as an adult. Does that make sense? Yeah. Most of us know right from wrong, and she would have known that her actions later on were very, very, very wrong. Because why would she hide the bodies, right? If she didn't know it was wrong. There's no excuse. So yeah, she was diagnosed with schizophrenia later on, but even people with schizophrenia, they do know right from wrong most of the time. Yes, when someone with schizophrenia is in full swing, their minds can become warped and they do see reality differently. But from what I've read, I'm not a doctor, I'm not anything like that. I'm going by what I've read. It says that people with schizophrenia do know that killing is wrong. Anyway, moving on. Dorothea was getting herself quite the reputation in town. as a really kind Mother Teresa type. I added the Mother Teresa type. Yeah, people weren't saying that. Mother Teresa, was she around back then? Yeah, she would have been. Anyway, people thought she was a caregiver who just wanted to help others. I mean, it really looked that way. She was providing these women with somewhere to call home when they needed it the most. A lot of these women were abuse victims. A lot of them were homeless. A lot of them were, addicts. And she was, giving these women somewhere to live. People were like, oh my God, you're so kind. Oh my God, Dorothea, you're amazing. That kind of thing. But yeah. Oh, also, Dorothea, she started seeing a man. He went by the name of Roberto Puente, and they got married in 1968. But again, this was not a happy marriage, and after only 16 months, they separated. So Dorothea, she wanted to get a divorce, and she went and got a divorce petition after telling the court that she was abused by her husband, and she went to find him to serve him with these papers. But she could not find him. He had gone. He had vanished. He was getting away. She later did find out that he had fled to Mexico, and the divorce wasn't finalized until 1973. So she managed to sort it out, but quite a bit later. And even when they went through that, they were still arguing. Even after they got divorced, they were still arguing. And there were a few altercations that resulted in Dorothea filing for a restraining order in 1975. And even though they weren't married long and there was a lot of chaos in that relationship, Dorothea took his name. She took his last name. Yeah. Go figure. Anyway, after all of that drama, Dorothea decided that she wanted to open a boarding house. So yeah, she would get some sort of payment for that. And that was in Sacramento. And she established herself as a genuine resource to the community to help alcoholics, the homeless, and mentally ill. Nice. She sounds lovely. We know she's not. So she would actually hold AA meetings, and she would help her boarders sign up for Social Security benefits. Ding, ding, ding. Are alarm bells going off in your guys' heads? She's helping them set up this money. She also changed the way that she dressed to make herself look more respectable, more trustworthy, like a nana look, even though she wasn't old enough to really be like that old. But remember, she lies about her age. She would wear vintage clothing, large granny glasses, and she let her hair turn grey. She also established herself as a respected member of Sacramento's Hispanic community, and social workers would actually recommend her as a great option for people to go to for accommodation. She looked after her people. That's what they're saying, not me. She would help with fundraising for charities and also scholarships. She sounds great, right? No. She is not great. She's bad. Really bad. Soon you will find out just how bad this witch is. She wasn't a sweet granny type at all. Also, she got married again. I got married once and I'm done. I'm like, nope, never again. Because look how that worked out. Now I'm single for like almost 7 years. I'm so lonely. Anyway, back to the story. So she married a guy called Pedro Montalvo, but he gapped it. He got out of there. Do you guys say gapped it in your country, wherever you're from? We say gapped it, like left. Yeah, so after a week of being married to Dorothea, he gapped it. I'm curious. I wonder why he left. Don't know why. He wasn't, I don't know. Okay, then rolled in 1978, and Dorothea was starting to show her true colors because this lovely charitable woman was taking her boarders' social security checks and she was cashing them in for herself. The authorities got wind of this and she got arrested. There goes that squeaky clean persona for now. For now, because she carries on. So yeah, maybe in that moment her community were like, oh, like maybe she's not this wonderful person we thought she was. Then on December the 21st, 1978, Dorothea was back in front of a judge and she was convicted of illegally cashing 34 state and federal checks that belonged to her tenants. She was given 5 years probation, and she was ordered to pay $4,000 in restitution. Honestly, I thought jail time would be on the cards for that, right? You would think. Like, here in New Zealand, if you did that crime, you would go to jail for like 2 years or something. Anyway, this punishment was nothing for her. It did not stop her from continuing to be the terrible person that she is, because on January the 16th, 1982, she met 74-year-old Malcolm McKenzie at a bar, and they went back to his apartment. While they were inside this apartment, Dorothea laced Malcolm's drink, and he started to feel groggy. He lay down on the couch, and while he was clearly unable to move, like he could not even lift his head, Dorothea started rummaging through his belongings. So she just started like helping herself to his things. She's taking his coins, she took his watches, jewelry, and she actually went up to him, to his finger, and pulled off the ring. So he's like in and out of consciousness, and she pulls off the ring on his finger. That ring was actually really special to Malcolm because it belonged to his late mum. Then she left. So Malcolm, he did go to the police when he woke up and realized exactly what happened. Like, he can remember parts of it, but he was so groggy. He said that he vaguely remembered what happened, but you know, he was so in and out at the time. So when he woke up, he was like, oh crap, she drugged me.
In 2010, and it has quite a backstory. In the 1980s, it was a boarding house. The owner, Dorothea Puente, was accused of killing tenants so she could steal their Social Security checks. Police found 7 bodies.
After Dorothea started to rent out her space, strange things started to happen in her home, and people were noticing. Like, funny smells in her backyard. People were like, oh, that stinks. And she's like, oh, it's just rats and sewage. Yeah, okay, Dorothea. So she had a female tenant called Ruth Monroe. Ruth was 61. She was going through some really hard times, and she was feeling quite down because her husband had been given some really terrible news. He had terminal cancer. So she went to Dorothea's place as like a respite away from the stresses of life. Yes, her mental health was not great, but her physical health was fine when she arrived. So 2 weeks later, Ruth was telling friends and family that she was feeling really sick. She was not feeling good at all. She actually said at one point that she felt like she was dying, like she was laying on her bed. Her son sat with her, and she had tears rolling down her eyes. She could not speak. She could not lift her head. She was just feeling so crap. Then on April the 28th, 1982, Ruth was found lifeless in her bedroom. The police arrived, and her death was ruled a suicide. But Ruth's family did not believe that she would take her own life. She loved her family. She loved her children. Why would she do that? She needed to be there for everybody. She just needed a break. Ruth and Dorothea, they were actually close. And Ruth considered Dorothea to be her best friend, to the point where Ruth's kids would call Dorothea grandma. They were not related, but they loved her so much. Ruth and Dorothea were even going into partnership together. They were opening this restaurant, and you know, that really shows that their friendship was really amazing. Amazing, I don't know. But sadly, Ruth's husband, he was diagnosed with this terminal cancer, and it just changed everything. She was really badly impacted, not just financially, not just emotionally, just every single way. She needed Dorothea for emotional support, and Dorothea offered her to come and stay at her place. Maybe that would save some money, so you know, her husband's off getting treatment. Maybe it would help out through this hard time, and you know, somebody to talk to. But pretty quickly after she started staying at Dorothea's house, she was feeling sick. She told her family that she was unwell, and apparently she also told them that Dorothea was giving her alcohol, and she didn't like alcohol, but she took it like because Dorothea was like, oh, it might help, like settle your nerves or whatever, and you know, yeah, so she did. She had the drink. Ruth's family thought that Dorothea was a caring person who was looking after her like a nurse, but it doesn't seem to be the case. I don't believe that she took her own life. When Ruth passed away, Her family were left so shocked and confused. The police told them that she took her life, but they did not believe that. Then they found out that Dorothea had taken Ruth's money. Dorothea handed over an empty purse, and they were like, where's her stuff? Like, she's like, oh, she's given everything to me, and just, there's the empty purse. Once news broke about Dorothea's murderous ways later on, Ruth's family were convinced that she had taken Ruth's life as well for her own financial gain. And her family insisted to police that she had been poisoned by Dorothea, and she was another one of the victims. But at this time, the police, they didn't look into it. They were like, no, it was a suicide. So it was left there for that moment. Then on May 16th, 1982, a 42-year-old lady called Dorothy Osborne invited her friend Dorothea over for a drink. The ladies were hanging out, having a drink together, having a good old time. And Dorothy realized after Dorothea left that her checkbook, her credit cards, and other items from her house were missing. She went and she reported this to the police. Now police, they got 2 reports. They got the one from Malcolm, the old guy who had his ring and stuff taken, and now Dorothy. So in July of 82, Dorothea was arrested and convicted of 3 grand theft charges. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison, state parole until March 21st, 86, and her federal parole sentence was extended another 2 years, so until 1990. Also, while she was in jail, she got herself a pen pal. This was an older gentleman. This was 77-year-old Everson Theodore Gilmouth, and he was from Oregon. They would send letters often, and Dorothea, when she was released, it was him who picked her up. She was released on September the 9th, 1985, pretty early. She only served half of her sentence. So she was picked up from the prison by her pen pal, Everson, and he brought his friend along, a guy called Ricardo, and they took her back to her house. Then, only a few days later, Everson turned up to Dorothea's house with his truck and his trailer. So it looked like he was moving in, maybe. A month later, Dorothea wrote a letter to Everson's sister. So she told her that her and Everson were going to be getting married, and they were getting married on November the 2nd of that same year. So a short time later, Dorothea, she hired a handyman. This was a man called Ismael Flores, and she wanted him to do some remodeling around the house. So she also asked him to do a really strange request. She requested a strange thing. She wanted him to build a box, a 6-foot by 30-inch by 30-inch storage box, and she agreed to give him Everson's truck and also $800 in cash. Yeah, it looks really bad for Everson. It does not look like that man is alive anymore. Then, the day after he completed this box, he returned to the house and he found that the box was nailed shut. And that's when Dorothea was like, hey, I need your help. I want to move this box, which now weighed about 300 pounds. And she was saying, I want to take it to a storage location. So he was like, okay, sure. But instead of going to that storage location, they ended up just pulling over and dumping this box near a river about half an hour to an hour away from Sacramento. We know who's in that box. And then on December the 28th, 98, it was determined that Everson was the previously unidentified body that was discovered by a fisherman along the Sacramento River on January the 1st, 1986. This poor man. He was found wrapped in plastic bags and covered with a bed sheet that was held in place by electrical tape. Oh, poor bugger. So mothballs and blue toilet deodorizer were also found inside the box. It was later discovered that after he died, Dorothea was mailing fake letters and cards to his family members in an attempt to make it look like that he was still alive and doing well, because back then we We didn't have cell phones and stuff. Why am I saying we? I wasn't around then. Oh, no, wait. I am nearly around 86. In 1 more year I'll be there. She also forged his signature on his truck's certificate of title and continued cashing his benefit checks until July of 86. Then in the fall of 86, a lady called Betty Mae Palmer, who was 78, moved into Dorothea's house. Then on October the 14th, 1986, Dorothea got herself a California ID card with her photo, but Betty's name. 2 months later, the mailing address on Betty's social security checks was changed, and now it had Dorothea's address. Dorothea then forged Betty's signature and cashed nearly $7,000 worth of benefit checks that belonged to Betty. What is $7,000 today? So we're doing 1986. That's a lot of money, man. What happened to Betty? I'll let you know soon. Then in November 1988, a social worker started to get a bit concerned because one of her clients, a guy called Alvaro Montoya, hadn't been heard from in a while. Alvaro was a tenant at Dorothea's house, as also there was another tenant there called John Sharp, and he told the same social worker that Dorothea had been making him dig holes. So this social worker's like, what the hell's going on? She was like, there is something wrong here. Why is this guy digging holes for this woman? What is going on and why are people going missing? And she went and told the cops. Good social worker. Police then headed over to speak to Dorothea at her house, and they wanted to ask her some questions, like, where are these people? When they asked where Alvaro was, she said that they went away on holiday to a family, and that maybe they'll be coming back soon. She didn't know for sure. Then they caught a break because John Sharp, the other guy that lives there, he slipped them a note without Dorothea seeing. So this note, it said, she's making me lie for her. Ding, ding, ding. Before the police left, they actually went up to Dorothea and they were like, hey, do you mind if we dig around in your backyard? And she was like, why would you want to do that? And they were like, oh, the social worker, she's concerned, and we're being told that there's holes being dug in the backyard and we just want to make sure everything's all right. And she was like, okay, you can go dig in my backyard. So they actually went and grabbed shovels, and she gave them shovels and they started digging. What they found? Absolutely heartbreaking. There were human remains buried in Dorothea's backyard. Then they took Dorothea in for questioning. Dorothea's neighbors had actually been asking what that smell was in her backyard before the police came a knocking. She just said that it was the sewage and rats. Okay. I don't think rats stink though. Do they? Maybe they do. Boy, rats do. I don't know. On October the 21st, 1986, Dorothea went to the hospital room of a 78-year-old woman called Leona Carpenter. She was staying with her. She had overdosed. We don't know if she did it herself. And Dorothea was given power of attorney over Leona, and she began to cash her social security checks immediately. In December, after Leona was released from this hospital, she went back to Dorothea's house. Once again, she returned to hospital. She was feeling ill, and just a few weeks after she was discharged in February of 1987, she just vanished. Poof, gone. In November of 1988, her body was found in the southeastern corner of Dorothea's yard. Toxicology reports of Leona's brain revealed the presence of codeine, diazepam, and flurazepam. In February of 1987, 62-year-old James Gallup moved into Dorothea's house. On July the 20th, 1987, a tumor was found in his colon. He agreed to get further testing, but Dorothea later contacted his doctor and just said that, he's gone to LA indefinitely. He won't be coming back. James Gallup's body was found buried under a gazebo in Dorothea's yard in November of 1988. Toxicology testing of his brain and his liver revealed the presence of amphetamines, Ventoin and flurazepam. In July 1987, 58-year-old Eugene Gamel was found deceased of an apparent suicide. They thought he had overdosed on his prescription medication. Dorothea, who was his landlady, said he had a history of suicide attempts. Though she was never charged for his death, he was considered a possible victim later. On October the 2nd, 1987, 61-year-old Vera Faye Martin was sent to live with Dorothea and started to feel sick. Also, starting on October the 5th, 1987, Dorothea, she was forging a number of Vera's social security checks. She ended up getting about $7,000 from this woman's social security checks. Like, the hell, man, leave her money alone. On October 19th, 1987, Vera hadn't contacted her daughter. It was her daughter's birthday. Every single year, she would ring her daughter and wish her a happy birthday, but she did not that year. Sad. In November 1988, Vera's body was found. She was buried under a metal shed in Dorothea's yard. Ugh, Dorothea sucks. Toxicology reports of her brain and her liver revealed flurazepam. On October 21st, 1987, 65-year-old Dorothy Miller was placed in an upstairs flat inside Dorothea's house. She introduced Dorothy to Ricardo Ordorica, and the following November, Ricardo became the representative payee for Dorothy's Social Security benefits. Just weeks after her arrival, Dorothy had disappeared. She was gone, vanished, without a trace. And on November the 20th, 87, Dorothea hired a carpet cleaner to remove a large pile of foul-smelling slime that was in Dorothy's room. I wonder what that was. Dorothea continued to forge Dorothy's checks, totaling over $11,000 after she was no longer at this house. Dorothy Miller's remains were later found buried under a slab of concrete near some rose bushes. Tissue samples from her brain revealed the presence of flurazepam. On November 29th, 1987, Brenda Trujillo sent a letter to the Social Security office in Sacramento. She was saying that Dorothea had stolen from her. Apparently she stole her Social Security checks, which totaled to about $3,500. That's back then, a lot of money. It was a lot of money back then as well. Brenda had met Dorothea in jail in 1982, and they later shared a prison cell, so they became, sort of friends. After her release, Brenda moved into Dorothea's boarding house, where Dorothea helped her apply for Social Security benefits. Brenda claimed that Dorothea drugged her and called her parole officer, causing her parole to be revoked before she started receiving her checks. What? In February of 1988, 51-year-old Alvaro Bert Gonzalez arrived at Dorothea's home. I've got a soft spot for this guy. I don't know why. Then in March, an application designating Dorothea as Bert's beneficiary payee was filed. At the end of August, a roommate saw a man clearing Bert's clothes. So it looked like he'd moved out. He missed an appointment on August the 29th, and he was last seen on August the 24th. Dorothea told several people that Bert went to Mexico to visit family. Social workers they tried to contact Bert. They just couldn't. They tried through September, October, they just could not find him. Bert had a social worker who actually really cared about him. She was quite close to him, and she knew about his life and how rough it had been. He had some mental health disabilities and ended up receiving electroshock therapy when he was a bit younger. It did not help. It made him feel worse. His family regretted doing that. They sent him, and that happened, and back then it was different. They thought it would help him, but it didn't. The doctors tried to give him medication. Apparently it made him feel sick. Bert was a lovely man. He just wanted to be loved, and he just wanted to enjoy his life. Like, he was a simple character. Like, he was a big giant of a man, but he was simple and adorable, kind of. Yeah. He actually enjoyed living at Dorothea's for a bit there. In November, Dorothea asked Donald Anthony, a former convict who had been working in her yard, to contact the social worker. She asked him to pretend to be Bert's brother-in-law. This dickhead agreed. So he called and said that his name was Michael Obregon and that he picked Bert up from Dorothea's house and took him to Utah. The social worker, she was really suspicious because she knew Bert's family, and she actually got in touch with this brother-in-law, and she told Dorothea that she was going to be contacting the authorities. Bert's body was found. He was found adjacent to Leona Carpenter. So sad. Toxicology testing revealed the presence of loxapine, flurazepam, carbamazepine. I think I said it right. Anyway, poor Bert. On March 9th, 1988, 55-year-old Benjamin Fink was sent to live with Dorothea. Poor guy. Ben's brother visited him every single week for 6 weeks. By the end of April, Ben was gone. Another tenant reported smelling a foul odor coming from his room, but when he asked, "What's that smell?" Dorothea just said that it was the sewer backup. On April 29th, Dorothea, she purchased 12 bags of cement. It doesn't look suspicious at all. Come on. That June, she had a hole dug next to the door of the metal shed, which was later filled in with concrete. Just hours after the first body was discovered in her backyard, Dorothea took off. She went on the run. On November 13th, 1988, an all-points bulletin was issued for Dorothea. It's like this elderly woman on the news, like, she's on the run. People would have been like, oh, she's so cute. And then they find out what she's done. And she's not even old. She makes herself look like that. She's not even old. On November the 16th, 1988, Charles Wilgus, along with Jean Silver of CBS, alerted police to Dorothea's whereabouts. They knew where she was. She was in a motel in LA. Charles actually met Dorothea, who was using the alias Donna Johansson the day before. She was at a pub. He later recalled seeing her on the news in the morning, and he reached out to his friend Jean Silver, who met with him at his apartment. They had a chat. They were like, yeah, it's her, and they contacted law enforcement. And Dorothea was arrested that same day. Well done, boys. Pat on the back. You got the witch. Then, on November the 17th, 1988, Dorothea was flown from Hollywood Burbank Airport to Sacramento. She was escorted by police, and she was booked into the county jail. Good. Leave her there. She was then formally charged with the murder of Bert. My poor Bert. I don't know, I just have a real soft spot for Bert. Like, I actually feel like it's so sad taking advantage of these people. In November of 88, Betty Mae Palmer's partially dismembered body was also discovered. She was buried in a shallow grave in Dorothea's front yard. How do people not see this shit, honestly? And how is she picking these people up? Her head, her hands, and her lower legs were never found. What happened to them? On March the 10th, 89, criminal charges against Ismael Flores were dismissed due to the statute of limitations expiring. He was the guy that I spoke about earlier. He was the handyman that helped build those boxes. I don't know, I got a funny feeling about him, because she wouldn't be able to lift those bodies by herself. He was also granted immunity for his testimony against Dorothea. Why did he need immunity? I don't know. On March 31st, 89, Dorothea was charged with 9 counts of murder with special circumstance qualifying it as a death penalty case. According to investigators, most of her victims had been drugged until they overdosed. Then she wrapped them in bed sheets and plastic lining before she dragged them to open pits in her backyard for burial. my question is, how did she lift that guy she was with, the pen pal, into the box by herself? Just when I look at her, I just can't picture this little lady dragging these bodies on her own, lifting. Like, dead weight is heavy. I know. I helped the police pick my granddad up and carry him to his bed when he died. He was really heavy. My granddad, he got up off his chair. He was on his way to the bathroom, and he died while he was standing up, and he fell to the ground. It's really sad. It's something I struggle with every day. I miss him a lot. But yeah, I just know that a deceased body is really heavy. Yeah, I don't want to talk about that anymore. Okay, so by May 24th, 1990, the prosecutor rested its case, having called 71 witnesses and introducing 108 exhibits in the preliminary hearing. On June 19th, 1990, a judge ruled that there was ample circumstantial evidence to send this bitch, oh my god, this witch, to trial. Oh my god, am I allowed to swear? And on July 31st, 1990, Dorothea pleaded not guilty because she is delusional. After numerous delays, on October the 19th, 1992, a judge ruled that Dorothea would face all 9 counts. On December 21st, 1992, 12 jurors consisting of 8 men and 4 women were selected for Dorothea's trial. The following month, 6 alternate jurors, 5 women and 1 man, were selected to back up the 12 regular jurors because it's a gruesome case. Dorothea's trial began on February the 9th, 1993, and 156 witnesses testified. That is a lot. And more than 3,100 exhibits had been submitted, and over 22,000 pages of transcript were recorded. So after deliberating for 11 days, on August the 2nd, 1993, the jury told the judge that they were deadlocked. They were deadlocked on all 9 counts of murder and asked for further instruction. So the next day, the judge just ordered them to resume their efforts to try and break this deadlock. They need to sort the shit. They need to sort it out. So on August 26, 1993, Dorothea Puente was convicted on 3 counts of murder. I know, only 3. These were for the deaths of Benjamin Fink, Leona Carpenter, and Dorothy Miller. The jury, after deliberating for 35 days, they remained deadlocked on the other 6 cases, which is really sad because, my guy, my dude, my Bert. So these were Ruth Monroe, Everson Theodore Gilmouth, Betty Mae Palmer, James Gallup, Vera Faye Martin, and Bert. So during the penalty phase of this trial, jurors found themselves deadlocked once again, and on October the 13th, 1993, Dorothea was spared the death penalty. She should have got it. What do you guys think? Do you believe in it? I don't know. On December 10th, 1993, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. I don't believe in the death sentence. I believe that some people deserve it, not everyone. But yeah, she was incarcerated at Central California Women's Facility in, is it Chowchilla? Am I saying that right? Chowchilla, California. Dorothea died in prison on March the 27th, 2011 from natural causes. She was 82 years old. Good bloody riddance. Because she is a horrible, horrible person, and she made me say the B word. I try not to swear because I'm a mum. Mums aren't supposed to swear. And I'm also on the internet. I don't think we're supposed to swear on the internet. But I hear Bailey Sarian swear all the time. And I'm like, damn it. No, why can't I as well? Because she's awesome. And she's got all the subscribers. And YouTube's like, we'll just let her off because she's great. Love that Bailey Sarian. Anyway, that was my little shout out to Bailey. She's the reason why I do this. I used to watch her every day at work, and then I lost my job. We can talk about that another time. Anyway, that story, oh my god, it's so sad. Bert, I don't know what it was, but I watched a bunch, because when I'm doing my research, I'm looking at everything. Like, I'm looking at the articles, the newspaper articles, I'm looking at Wikipedia, I'm looking at videos, I watched a Netflix doco about this case, and oh, bitch, he's just so sweet. He's like this big giant, and he's just so sweet. He's like real simple and sweet, and I just wanted to hug him. I was like, Dorothea. Yeah, okay. So, what do you guys think? Are you gonna reply? I ask you guys questions and no one ever responds. That's alright. I'll just sit here in my basement talking to myself. It's okay. Anyway, I need to go pick up my kids. This story wasn't actually meant to go on this long. This was actually supposed to be a shorter one, but I got a little bit rambly. Yeah. It was meant to be a 30-minute video, but look what happened. I was like, all right, if I start now, I can finish in half an hour, and then I've got 20 minutes before I have to go get my kids. So I need to go get my kids. I hope you guys have a wonderful morning, day, night, whatever it is where you are. I hope you all have had a wonderful Easter. My son got hyper as heck on his Easter egg that my mum bought him. See, I am one of those parents that are like, I will buy you a bunny. Not a real bunny, a toy one. And we're not getting bunnies. But yeah, I will get you a toy bunny. And then Nana comes along with this freaking giant Easter egg. And I'm like, oh Christ. I tried to avoid that. Anyway, I gotta go. I gotta go pick my kids up from school and daycare. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Let me know what you think about this case, about that terrible witch. Apologies for saying the B word. I'm such a badass. Oh my god. Oh my god, I just said ass. I'm a rebel. Yay. No, I'm not a rebel. I'm the big softie. Anyway, have a great day. Bye. So long. See ya. Inohora. That means bye-bye.